Welcome to this episode of the Film Florida podcast. My name is John Lux, and I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. Thanks for downloading this episode of the podcast. Before I introduce you to our guest, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, rate, and review the Film Florida podcast. If you're not already a member of Film Florida, please consider joining at filmflorida.org. Finally, check out the Film Florida merchandise page at teespring.com/stores/Film Florida to purchase Film Florida t-shirts, sweatshirts, and coffee mugs. Veronica Nickel is a Florida-based producer. Her credits include the Netflix original Uncorked, A Kid Like Jake, which premiered at Sundance in 2018, the Netflix original entitled First Match, which premiered at South by Southwest in 2018 and won the Game Changer and Audience Awards. We also talked to her about her role as co-producer and line producer on the Golden Globe and Academy Award-winning Moonlight. Here's my conversation with Veronica Nickel. Thanks for joining us on the Film Florida podcast, Veronica.
Thanks.
So let's start at the beginning. How did you get your start in the industry?
I started in the industry late. I wanted to go to film school right after finishing undergraduate, and I got really great advice to wait a bit and go get some real-world experience. And so I did that, and I went back to film school in my late 20s, I guess after having a quarter-life crisis. But by that point, I had a lot of corporate experience under my belt, and I had traveled a lot in the U.S. for work, and I had lived in Australia for this consulting work that I was doing, and I had a lot of experience talking to executives and companies, and it was just like invaluable life experience, both for work and just, living abroad and living life and figuring out creatively the things I was drawn to. And so I went back to school. Eventually, I went to Columbia for their graduate film program. And by that point, I thought there was a part of me that had this dream of being a screenwriter. But once I got in the room there with extremely talented screenwriters, I realized that kind of everything to my life to that point was building up to me being a producer. And I understood financials and understood kind of the business side of film. It came very easy to me. And so that's kind of how I got my start. I left Columbia and jumped in with both feet into producing.
And after film school, do you remember what your first real job was in the industry and how you got it?
Yeah, so when I left film school, I think because I had already had experience with corporate life, I really wanted to be my own boss, whatever that is. I don't think you're ever actually your own boss, even when you are your own boss. In the industry, there's always somebody who controls the money. But I wanted to, quote unquote, be my own boss. And I actually graduated from film school a little bit early because I had participated in so many short films. I thought staying longer was not going to do me any good. And if I'm not getting paid for film school, I might as well not get paid and go make some feature films. And so that's what I did. So my first gigs were being a producer on a film. I just wasn't getting paid. And so I did my first couple of features, and they were really tiny budgets, like $150,000 and $350,000 budgets. But I jumped into being a producer. But at that point, a producer on a film like that, not only are you figuring out how to set up the corporation and all of that, you're taking out trash, you're processing payroll, you're catering breakfast, you're doing all of it.
Right.
And so, being your own boss, you're still you still report to everybody on set. You still report to everybody. So, but that was really what I wanted to do, and it was worth it to me to take a little time. I feel like producing is so much based on experience and going through things. It's really hard to learn producing by case studies or whatever. There's very valuable information you have to get in a classroom, and then the rest of it you have to just learn by making mistakes and doing. And so that's what I did for the beginning of my career. And then eventually I was able to get paid, and then eventually I got an agent who I usually went to get crew, and she was like, "Why are you not a line producer?" And so because I had done everything myself as a producer, my own budgeting, my own actualization, my own accounting, my own payroll, all of that, the skills lent to being able to line produce for other people. And so that's what I did for 5 years or so, is I would have my own producing projects that I had that were my own babies that I would do from start to finish, that 7 to 10 year process. And then there were other projects that I was hired on as just a line producer. And I would come in for production and maybe stay through post production or what have you, but I would definitely be there for the beginning, middle, and wrap of production, if not a little bit longer.
Veronica, in 2010, you were chosen to take part in the prestigious Sundance Institute Creative Producing Summit. You've also been a fellow or participated in Film Independence Fast Track, Independent Film Projects No Borders, Tribeca All Access, and San Francisco Film Society. Pick one or two of those, or talk in general about all those opportunities and what they've meant for your career.
Yeah, I think the labs and the fast track dating spaces where you can pitch and the grants, all of those fellowships, I feel like critical, to me, almost as critical as the first step of graduate school, because you're building credibility within the industry, because outside institutions are saying that you're a credible producer or you're credible at what you're doing or you show potential when you don't have a body of work to fall back on. And so I feel like part of the process of filmmaking as a producer is, I feel like the beginning of that game is getting known by all these institutes. And it's difficult. It's just like the festival game. It's just like the sales and distribution game. Like eventually you have to be known. And these labs and fellowships and grants and all of that are just the way of building credibility for your skill set before you have the body of work that says, I know how to produce a movie, or I can turn in something on time and on budget, and it's a beautiful product, and it moves people and all of that. And so, and the thing about it is, like, they all know each other. All those labs, they don't commingle, and they all have very specific focus, but they all know each other, and you can leverage your experience with one to help you make inroads with another. And of course, some of them have money, which is very helpful when you're trying to figure out all the loose ends in your early career. And I still now, even though I'm mid-career now, I still call on my contacts and the relationships that I have in those labs for very different reasons. I don't necessarily need them to help me make my film, but to meet other like-minded people or to help me, they've just been critical for my success. And the issue there is like getting in and breaking in, which is the same difficulty when you're trying to break in, like I said, to financing and to festivals and to selling your film, all of those things. And so if you're persistent enough and you are able to pick some good projects early on and attach yourself to good content, and then, make relationships and inroads with these, if you don't get in on your first project, keep going back, because you develop a rapport with them and they look at your projects over time. And, even if you can't participate in one of their labs, they still can have a relationship with emerging filmmakers. So I think, there's no one that has been any more important to my career than any of the others, because they've all given me something very different along the way, all that was critical in order to kind of launch myself into higher budget films.
And when someone wonders if they can be successful working in the independent and documentary film market, from now on, I'm going to point them to your bio on IMDb. Just in the last decade, you've been the producer on roughly 20 films, many of which aren't household names. Talk about finding success in the indie and documentary film genre.
I think to be successful really builds upon kind of the foundation that you're laying for your career. Like I'm saying, building relationships with labs and people who can help build credibility. When you go out to actually make your films, you always have to keep an eye on the kind of filmmaker you want to be. And so I think for me, I have found a working career because you just be good, be a good person, be trustworthy, operate with transparency. Your crew is your lifeline. Respect them. Have humility. You don't have to know everything. And the irony is, as a producer, you feel like you have to have all the answers, and you really have to get over the fact that you may not have all the answers, and it's okay to say to the people in your sphere, that you're collaborating with that you may not have those answers. And I just think having success in anything, but especially in indie film, if you can do those really simple things and be a good person, I get a lot of comments about it's really great to work with you. You're actually a collaborative and compassionate producer. And to me, it's like we should all be that because that's what we need to be in life. We should all be transparent with what we're doing, with the people we're collaborating with. Like, there's no games. It's way too hard to make a film to not be transparent and humble and appreciative and all of those things. It's just way too difficult to kind of do it a more difficult, harsh way. And so for me, building those relationships based on doing incredible work just builds my reputation, and people recommend me, and I have an agent, and all of those things. That's how you build it slowly. Some people have huge breakout films, and I had one, and that was very helpful as a stepping stone for my career. But you have to take that and continue operating with integrity. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of producers that kind of live by those principles, unfortunately, or I run into a lot of people that say the way I operate is unique, and that's sad. But I think it's the way to create longevity with your career.
Veronica, you're a Florida resident. For those that aren't from Florida or don't work in Florida on a regular basis, talk about your preference of working in the state other than just so you can sleep in your own bed.
What's funny is I have never slept in my own bed until now for work. So I don't know what that's like until this current job that I'm at. And I think, unfortunately, it's a lack of opportunity in Florida. And, part of that I'm sure that you talk about on your podcast is, the lack of incentive in Florida and having projects going to other states that could come here. I know that I get asked to schedule and budget films as a part of making my living. That's what I do for films that are in development. And I read films and they take place in Florida, and I'm so excited. I was like, oh, they must come to me because I'm in Florida and I know this market, and great, this is a film that's set here. And then when I get on the phone with them, they're like, so how do we make this in Georgia or Louisiana or wherever? And it's like, it's a shame that you can't work more from home. And hopefully that's going to change. For me right now, it's going to change, with my current opportunity. But I would hope that we can bring some more projects and more compelling content to be created here. It just seems like they're hungry for content out there, and we should be able to participate in that because Florida is such a unique place, both geographically, and I feel like the crew base that at least used to be here was just very experienced on many different kinds of films, and that only makes overall production, the quality of production, go higher. So my hope is that all of that comes back so I can sleep in my bed more often when I'm working on projects.
Speaking of one of the films that are unique to Florida, you're listed as a co-producer and line producer on Moonlight. So talk about how you got involved with the film, and beyond just those titles, what exactly was your role on the film?
Yeah, so Adela Romansky, the producer, sent me the script, and I fell in love with the script. And I was a fan of Medicine for Melancholy, which is Barry's first film that he made. And the third thing was, I was in the process of moving to Florida. My mother had a stroke, and she was very disabled, and so I needed to kind of move my life down here to be close to her. And so I was going to be based in Delray, which is not a commutable distance for Miami. So I didn't get to be, quote unquote, home in my new home, but I got to be in South Florida and be in Miami. And so I read that script, and I remember in my first conversation with Adela, it was like, if somebody reads a script and doesn't immediately jump on board to want to make this film, we don't want them because it's just, it was that compelling. And then after meeting Barry, he's a very special director, and I've worked with a lot of very special directors, but he's very kind, and he has, a very focused vision. It was a perfect combination for that project.
It sounds like you knew Moonlight was special from the time you first read the script, but Was there a time in the middle of pre-production or in the middle of filming it that you thought to yourself, wow, this is going to be more than just a nice gig for a couple of months?
What's interesting is when we were making Moonlight, I didn't think we were making Moonlight. It wasn't Moonlight. I went to make Moonlight for the reason at that point in my career I had made so many films or whatever, a handful of other films, was because it was a very compelling script by a very interesting director who had a unique vision for what he wanted to do. And that it was like early on in your career, you can make those choices to go do those projects. Nobody got paid a living wage on that film, really, in terms of, we met all the union standards and stuff, but it was like we all did it as a labor of love. I mean, you asked like what my role was on that film. I was the line producer, but I also drove cast and I did, it's just like we did so many things on that film. I slept on an air mattress. Like those are the things that you do for love. You share many people in one house, and we're all there for the same reason. And I've done that for other films that were very special, just like Moonlight. There was a point in production when you could see the footage and you could see the caliber of the actors just was just had something very special. And you realize that the struggle that we were all going through, working kind of the hours that we were working in a challenging environment and all kind of wearing more than one hat, it was all for something that was going to be very, very special. And we became one with the communities we were shooting in, which was also very special. It's just like casting locals, being of Miami, both in story and in the way we were approaching the production. And so once we got into production, it was enough time to feel like, oh, we're approaching this in a very different way. And that felt very special.
So at first, Moonlight had a limited release and it made some noise immediately. Then award season came around and it was nominated for what seemed like everything. And pretty much almost everything that it was nominated for, it won. So what was that like?
The distributor put so much love and care behind the release of that film and the marketing of the film and letting it find its audience and letting it kind of grow. And it was already a beautiful film to begin with. And so, having the patience to let it find its audience on its own, it just is a luxury that films and distributors don't have very much any longer. And it was a roller coaster ride, except for that it never dropped. It was just like a roller coaster ride that just kept going up. You never went down. So it's an exciting thing to be a part of a film that has an Oscar campaign behind it for so many things, and is winning lots of awards and getting a lot of recognition. Of course, it's great because it's great for indie film and it broke a lot of barriers, I feel like, for indie films, recognition and their credibility. And of course, it's great for our careers and showing people that, oh, you've made other films, but you made a film that everybody loves, which is, it's just another level of credibility.
So you mentioned the Oscars. So February 26, 2017, after winning Best Drama at the Golden Globes, Moonlight was nominated in a number of categories, most notably Best Picture. And by now, everybody has seen it. La La Land gets announced as the winner, only to be told it was a mistake, and Best Picture actually went to Moonlight. You watched on TV like most of us. I'm not even sure what to ask about that moment, so just take it where you want. Tell us what that night and that moment was like for you.
Sure, yeah. I had hoped to be at the ceremony, but we had such a large cast that our ticket pool was very limited. So I was able to watch it actually with some of the crew at a special crew screening that was arranged in Miami. And I started watching it with the other crew members and just realized after Mahershala won and after, we started, things started really rolling, I thought, I really want to be with my mom watching this. It seemed like a very special moment. And she's very disabled, and it's a special time in my life. And so I actually raced home from Miami. I'm sure I did the speed limit the entire way. And I got home to actually finish the last bit, because that award show went very long that year, to finish the last bit and watching the last couple of awards. And And I have to be honest that once La La Land was announced, I got so angry, which I never do, but I got so angry I cursed at the screen and I turned the TV off and I walked into the other room and I just started brushing my teeth and whatever I was. And then my phone started blowing up, so I had no idea what had happened. And my phone just was going berserk. And I thought, why are all these people contacting me? And finally, it dawned on me that I had missed a huge moment for the film. And I wonder so many people, and of course, at that point, I wanted to see it replayed, and it took a couple hours for the footage to be loaded up on screen. So I think I learned my lesson by watching all the way to the very end. You never know what's going to happen with any story. It could be a surprise ending, and really give it all the way to the end. And yeah, I mean, it would have been special to share that moment with my fellow crew members in Miami, but it was also very special to have this odd moment of missing a very important moment in my career, missing it and having to kind of catch up later, which was hilarious in its own right. So there you go.
So Veronica, here's my confession. I have the identical experience. I was watching it downstairs in my house all by myself. Everybody had gone to bed and they announced La La Land and I was disappointed. And I thought to myself, well, it still was a great night for Moonlight and a great night for Florida. And I turned off the TV and went upstairs. And by the time I brushed my teeth and got ready to go into bed, I looked at my phone and there was an alert that, it said something about some weird moment at the end of the Oscars. And so I started scrolling through Twitter and that's how I found out that Moonlight actually won. So I'm right there with you on the experience. Yeah.
There you go. Well, it's good that we have such connectivity with each other that people will reach out to you immediately and tell you that you've missed something. So that's on my end, at least, is a good moment for my community.
Yes. Veronica, you mentioned that you have a new opportunity. Tell us about it. I know it's something you're really excited about.
I am very excited. So I am working with an individual who is willing to make the investment to support kind of what he believes, putting his money where his mouth is. And he has started a new social justice documentary film company, but it's based in Delray Beach, Florida, which happens to be where I live. There was no connection there, just pure coincidence. They want to make 3 documentaries a year, which anybody who makes films, especially kind of documentary production, knows the process can be long, and 3 a year is quite an undertaking. I'm very excited. And while the subject matter is not all going to be in Florida, but all of the team will be based here. We're recruiting directors to come work for us and associate producers and coordinators, and we'll have editing taking place here. And it's a really exciting opportunity to kind of do good and explore challenging topics. And I just joined the company recently, but their first production is in post-production right now. So it should be finished mid-2020 with the hopes of coming out in the fall of 2020. And our hope is to kind of, get the ball rolling to something bigger and better. And it's wonderful to see people financing really important work that challenges all of these things that we're facing in today's very complicated society. And so to have somebody really make the investment in that is very exciting. It's really exciting. So I'm doing that in Delray Beach for a company called Core Media. And so I'll be shifting a bit my focus to documentary work for the next little bit. And I'm very excited for that.
Well, that sounds really exciting. And besides the new job, where can people find some of your other recent work?
So I have a film called First Match that we did for Netflix. So it's on Netflix. And that came out after Moonlight. I used a lot of the experience from Moonlight when making First Match. And then I did a film called A Kid Like Jake, which is on Amazon. And then I have a film called Uncorked with Prentice Penny, and that is going to premiere at South by Southwest in March 2020. And that's then eventually going to be on Netflix shortly thereafter. So I have other films out there floating around on Netflix and other platforms. You have to be very inventive about getting your work out.
Well, Veronica, I really appreciate you making the time for us today. Thanks for being on the Film Florida podcast, and we look forward to seeing your continued success in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Film Florida podcast. For more information about Film Florida, go to filmflorida.org or visit our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Check out the Film Florida merchandise at teespring.com/stores/filmflorida, and please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast.